a promise to forever. A billionaire was about to get married until he saw a doctor, his ex, with twins. 6 years after he left her, not knowing she was pregnant, Julian Cole, heir to one of the largest construction companies in the country, runs into Dr. Elena Suarez in the most improbable place, a hospital's grand reopening ceremony, where she, now head of pediatrics, gets on stage. He crumbles inside as he sees her in the audience. But it's not the reunion that changes everything. It's what comes next. 2 blonde boys, with blue eyes identical to his, run toward her, calling, "Mom." Julian feels the ground disappear. They were his sons, and no one had told him. Now, with the truth exposed, he will have to face the past, break off a toxic engagement, and prove he is ready to be a father, and perhaps win back the love of the woman who raised an entire family alone. The afternoon sun in March filtered through the wide windows of Our Lady of Guadalupe Children's Hospital, creating small rainbows on the silent IV bags hanging beside the beds. Elena Suarez adjusted the stethoscope around her neck and observed the familiar movement of the pediatric hallway. Nurses on shift conversed in low voices, and the soft echo of hurried footsteps resounded on the waxed floor. And there, always there, was the sweetest sound in the world, the crystalline laughter of a child who had just been discharged. At 32, Elena wore on her face the serenity of someone who had learned to turn pain into care. Her brown hair, always tied in a practical bun, framed honey-colored eyes that had the unique ability to calm any patient with just one look. She was loved by parents, respected by colleagues, and had an almost legendary reputation for being able to get even the most restless babies to fall asleep in her arms. "Dr. Suarez, the ceremony begins in 15 minutes, said Marta, the head nurse, appearing at the door of the medicine room where Elena was reviewing the afternoon's files. Elena sighed, putting the pen back in her coat pocket. The hospital's privatization had been announced 3 months earlier, and today would be the official handover of the new pediatric wing. Renovations, modern equipment, promises of better care. All of that sounded good on paper. But she knew the healthcare system well enough to know that promises were not always kept. "Is the responsible company really going to be present?" she asked, more out of courtesy than genuine curiosity. "Cole Construction? The owner himself is coming to the ceremony." Marta smiled, tidying up some papers. "He must be someone important? The whole board is nervous." The name resonated in Elena's mind like a distant echo of a song she would have preferred to forget. "Cole." She shook her head, pushing away any unnecessary thoughts. Mexico City had thousands of companies, thousands of last names. It was just a coincidence. 20 minutes later, Elena went up to the small stage set up in the hospital's main lobby. The place was full. Employees, local press, a few politicians, and in the front row, men in dark suits who clearly did not belong in that hospital environment. She held the microphone. She took a deep breath and began. "Good afternoon. My name is Elena Suarez. I have been head of pediatrics at this hospital for 4 years. I want to talk about what this reform means to us, but mainly to the children and families we serve here." It was then that she saw him. In the front row, among the executives, a man of about 35 was watching her with an expression she knew all too well. His blonde hair had some lighter strands, as if time had brushed over them. His face was more angular and mature, but with the same blue eyes that had once made her believe in forever. Julian Cole. He was there, motionless as a statue, his gaze fixed on her. The words died in Elena's throat. The microphone trembled in her hands. The silence in the auditorium stretched for seconds that felt like an eternity, until she forced her voice to return. "I apologize. As I was saying, this reform represents hope. But Elena could no longer concentrate on the speech. Each word came out automatically, while her mind fought against the flood of memories that Julian brought with him. Her hands were sweating, her heart was racing, and she felt herself once again as the young 26-year-old doctor who had fallen madly in love with a man she couldn't have. When she finished the presentation and came down from the stage, Julian was no longer in the audience. "Mom! Mom!" Two identical voices echoed down the hallway. Elena turned and smiled, feeling her heart calm for the first time since she had gone on stage. Leo and Tiago ran toward her, small toy white coats over their school clothes, backpacks bouncing on their backs. At 6 years old, the twins were the perfect combination of pure energy and infinite affection. They had come home early from school. Elena knelt down to hug them, breathing in the smell of children's shampoo that always calmed her. "Aunt Claudia said there's a party here at the hospital today," said Leo, always the most curious. "Can we see it? And is there cake?" Tiago completed, pragmatic as always. Elena laughed, taking both of their hands. "Let's go see the party then, but only for a little bit. After, we need to go home and do homework." "Oh, Mom," they grumbled in unison, but were already pulling Elena back toward the main lobby. It was exactly as they rounded the corner of the main hallway that Elena stopped abruptly. There, standing next to the reception desk, Julian Cole was watching her again. But this time, his eyes were not on her. They were fixed on Leo and Tiago. Elena saw the exact moment that reality hit Julian like a punch to the stomach. The blue eyes identical to his own, the shape of the face, the color of the hair. It was like looking into a mirror of the past multiplied by 2. Julian took a step forward, then stopped. His expression changed from surprise to something Elena couldn't decipher. Astonishment, pain, maybe even hope. "Mom, who is that man?" Leo whispered, hiding behind Elena's leg. "He's looking at us a lot. He looks sad," Tiago observed, always more empathetic. "Did we do something wrong?" Elena felt the ground disappear from under her feet. 6 years of protection, of well-intentioned lies, of sleepless nights explaining to herself why it was better this way. All of it was crumbling in a matter of seconds. Julian approached slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. He stopped a few feet away and said in a hoarse voice, "Elena." "Julian." The name came out of her lips like a confession. Leo and Tiago looked at each other, with that sharp perception that children have for shifts in adults' emotional atmosphere. "There," Julian began, but couldn't finish the sentence. "We need to talk." "Elena," he said firmly, "but not here, not now. Elena, I didn't know. If I had known." "I said not here," she repeated, holding the children's hands tighter than she intended. "Mom, are you okay?" Tiago asked, frowning. "Your hands are freezing." Elena knelt down again, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, love. Just a little tired. How about we go home early today?" "But what about the cake?" Leo protested. "Another day, I promise." Julian watched the interaction with the expression of someone who had just discovered the existence of an entire continent he didn't know existed. When Elena stood up to leave, he gently stopped her by the arm. "Please, just tell me, are they 6? So many things she wanted to say, so many accusations, so many questions, so much accumulated pain that it could all come out at once and explode like a bomb in the middle of that crowded hallway. But there were also 2 children holding her hands, and they came first. Always. "Yes," she said simply. "They're 6. Julian closed his eyes, and Elena saw his shoulders tremble slightly. "My God! Elena, No, not now," she interrupted him. "If you want to talk, call me, but far from here. They don't need any more confusion in their lives." Elena walked past him without looking back, guiding Leo and Tiago to the exit. But in the elevator, Tiago asked. Mom, that man knows us. And Leo, always direct, completed. He has the same eyes as us. Elena took a deep breath, pressed the button for the ground floor, and decided that lying to them was becoming increasingly difficult. And maybe, after 6 years, it was time to stop trying. Stop. What would you do if you were in Elena's shoes? Would you allow Julian to be a part of your children's lives? Or is it too late for a second chance? Share your opinion in the comments. The beginning of a new life. That night, after the children were asleep, Elena sat on the balcony of her simple but cozy apartment in the Roma Norte neighborhood. The city throbbed below, with constant traffic and lights that never went out. She held a cup of tea that had already grown cold, but she didn't remember drinking. The phone rang 5 times before she answered. Elena? Julian's voice was different, broken, vulnerable in a way she had never heard before. What do you want, Julian? I need to know. I need to understand. Why did you never tell me? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Are you serious? You really want to know why I never told you I was pregnant with the man who called me a gold digger and said he never loved me? Elena, No, you're going to listen to me now. Her voice was firm, 6 years of pain finally finding its way out. I found out I was pregnant 3 days after we broke up in that awful downtown cafe. 3 days, Julian. I had the test in my purse when you said I was just a fling. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I almost called you, Elena continued. I almost went to your house, but then I remembered the way you looked at me that day, as if I were a mistake you wanted to erase, and I thought, why would he want to know about a child with me, if he didn't even want me? My God, Elena, I was a coward. You were a boyfriend, she interrupted him, and I was the secret mistress. You don't need to make up excuses now. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And you know what else? I don't regret it. It may sound crazy, but I don't regret it. Because Leo and Tiago grew up without the burden of being sons of a man who abandoned them. They grew up free, loved, without needing to fight for attention with important last names or a millionaire inheritance. Julian took a long time to respond. They're my sons, Elena. They are, biologically. But you are not their father. A father is someone who is present. A father is someone who wakes up in the middle of the night when they have nightmares. A father is someone who teaches them to tie their shoelaces and not to hit their classmates at school. You are just the man who contributed half of their DNA. That can change. Julian's voice was desperate now. I can learn. I want to learn. Why? The question came out harder than Elena intended. Why now, Julian? Because you saw them and they look like you. Because you're finally sure they're yours. Or because your heavy conscience won't let you sleep. Because I never stopped loving you. The words hung in the air like a confession that had come 6 years too late. Elena felt her heart clench, but she forced her voice to remain firm. Love isn't enough, Julian. I learned that the hard way. I can prove it. Let me prove that I've changed. How? Elena asked, genuinely curious. How are you going to prove you changed when you don't even know who they are? Do you know that Leo is afraid of clowns but loves dinosaurs? That Tiago only eats fruit if you draw a happy face on the peel? That they share everything, absolutely everything, except the last cookie in the package because each one wants the other to have it? Julian was silent. Do you know that they ask me about their father almost every week, and that I'm dying to make up a beautiful story, but I can't lie to them? Do you know that Leo cries in secret because his friends have a dad and he doesn't? That Tiago says that when he grows up he'll get me a husband, so I won't be alone? Elena's voice broke on the last sentence. I didn't know, Julian whispered. Elena, I swear if I had known, but you didn't know. And now they are here, and they are perfect and happy, and I'm very afraid that you'll show up in their lives and then disappear when you get tired of playing father. That's not going to happen. How can you be sure? Because I saw them today. I looked into their eyes. And Elena, it was as if a part of me that I didn't even know was lost had returned to its place. Elena closed her eyes. She knew that feeling. It was exactly how she felt every morning when Leo and Tiago ran to her bed and woke her up with sticky kisses on her face. They are my everything, Julian. If you want any chance of being a part of their lives, you'll have to prove yourself to me, to us, and it won't be easy. What do you want me to do? A DNA test, she said, surprising herself. I know they are yours. You know they are yours. But I want this to be documented. Officially, if you're going to be in their lives, I don't want any legal doubts in the future. Of course, whatever it takes. And Julian, Elena hesitated. Are you still engaged to Sophia? The silence stretched for so long that Elena thought the call had been cut off. Julian! Yes, I still am. Elena felt as if someone had thrown a bucket of cold water on her. Then we have nothing to talk about. Elena, wait. No, you show up in my life after 6 years, you find out you have children, and you're still engaged to the same woman you abandoned me for. Do you really think I'm going to let you meet my children, and then have to explain to them why you chose someone else again? It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You choose, like you chose 6 years ago. The difference is that now, if you choose wrong, it won't just be my heart you'll break. Elena hung up the phone and stayed there on the balcony until the sun came up. What do you think of Elena's ultimatum? Is she right to demand that Julian break off his engagement before letting him meet the children? Or is this a mistake? Join the discussion in the comments. The last word, when Leo and Tiago woke up, they ran to the kitchen as they always did, expecting to find their mother making breakfast. But Elena was sitting at the table, still in her robe, with deep dark circles under her eyes, and an expression they had never seen before. Mom? Tiago approached slowly. Did you sleep? Elena opened her arms, and the two of them snuggled up to her, one on each side. Not much, she admitted, but everything is fine. Were you thinking about the man from yesterday? Leo asked, with the amazing perception of children. Elena looked at him, surprised. Why do you think that? Because you got weird after seeing him. And you only get like that when you're worried about important things. Was he important? Tiago asked. Elena took a deep breath. He was, a long time ago. But people change, and sometimes what was important stops being important. But if he was important one day, can he be important again? Leo asked. Elena looked at the two children, with their curious blue eyes and their questions that went straight to the heart of the matter. 6 years trying to protect them from a pain that maybe no longer even existed. 6 years denying them the right to know half of their story. He can, she said finally, but only if the person proves that they deserve to be important again. Tiago and Leo looked at each other with that silent communication that only twins possess. Then we'll wait for him to prove it, Tiago finally said. Elena hugged them tighter. We'll wait for him to prove it. 2 weeks passed since the reunion at the hospital, and Elena felt as if she were walking on a bridge that swayed with every step. The DNA test had confirmed what everyone already knew. Leo and Tiago were Julian Cole's sons. The official document was stored in her desk drawer, next to the children's birth certificates, as a silent reminder that some truths cannot be ignored forever. Julian had called every day since then. He didn't pressure. He didn't demand. He just asked how they were, if they needed anything, if Elena had thought about when he could meet the children properly. His voice on the phone conveyed a contained anxiety that she recognized. It was the same anxiety that consumed her every time Leo or Tiago got hurt, and she couldn't do anything but wait. Dr. Suarez, there's a man at reception asking for you, Carla, the hospital receptionist said, appearing at the door of the medicine room. He says it's urgent. Elena looked at the clock on her wrist. It was 15 minutes to 6 in the afternoon. Leo and Tiago would arrive in 10 minutes, brought by the nanny who picked them up from school twice a week. She sighed, putting away the files she was reviewing. Send him up. When Julian appeared at the door, Elena immediately realized that something was different. He was wearing dark jeans and a white dress shirt without a tie, very different from the impeccable suits he wore at the company. His hair was slightly messy, as if he had run his hands through it several times, and there was a determination in his eyes that she hadn't seen in a long time. I broke up with Sophia, he said without preamble. Elena stopped organizing the papers on the table. What? I ended the engagement. Earlier today. I told her everything. About you, about the children, about how I should never have chosen what I chose 6 years ago. Elena felt the ground move beneath her feet, but she forced her voice to remain calm. And how did she react? How do you think she reacted? Julian ran his hands through his hair. She said I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that you were an opportunist, that the children might not even be mine for real, that I was being manipulated. And what did you say? That she was talking about the woman I love, and about my children, and that if she said one more word about you, I would call security. Elena felt something move inside her chest, a mixture of relief, fear, and a dangerous hope that she had buried years ago. Julian, I know it doesn't change anything that happened. I know it doesn't erase the 6 years I wasn't here, but now I'm free to try to fix what I broke. Before Elena could respond, the sound of little footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by the familiar voices. Mom! Aunt Claudia said you were here. Leo and Tiago appeared at the door of the room. They stopped abruptly when they saw Julian. The three of them watched each other for a tense moment, and Elena saw the same look of astonishment from 2 weeks ago on Julian's face. Hello, Tiago said shyly. Hello, Julian replied, his voice hoarse. You're Leo and Tiago, right? Yes, Leo confirmed, always more direct. And you're the man who made Mom weird. Leo! Elena reprimanded him, but Julian laughed, a genuine and nervous sound. Yes, I think I'm that man, he said, crouching down to be at the children's height. I'm sorry for making your mom weird. I didn't mean to. Why were you looking at us that day? Tiago asked, with the innocent curiosity of children. Julian looked at Elena, asking for permission in silence. She took a deep breath and nodded almost imperceptibly. Because you remind me of when I was little, Julian said carefully. You have the same eyes as me. Leo frowned, studying Julian's face. It's true. Tiago, look at his eyes. They're just like ours. Tiago nodded in wonder. Does that mean you're our... It's complicated, Elena interjected quickly. We'll talk about this at home, okay? But Leo, always perceptive, had made the connections. You're our dad. It wasn't a question. It was a statement said with the certainty of a child who had just discovered the missing piece of the puzzle. Julian closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they were moist. Yes, I am. Why did you never come to see us? Tiago asked with the brutal honesty of children. Because I didn't know you existed, Julian replied, his voice breaking. And when I found out, I first needed to make sure I could be a real father to you. And can you now? Leo asked. I want to try very hard, if you let me. The twins looked at each other with that silent communication they possessed, and Elena saw an entire conversation happen in a matter of seconds. Can we think about it? Tiago finally said. Of course, Julian smiled, and Elena saw discreet tears running down his face. You can think about it for as long as you want. 3 days later, Elena was finishing a delicate surgery on a premature baby when her cell phone vibrated insistently. She ignored the first few calls, but when she realized there were 15 missed calls in 20 minutes, she asked the nurse to answer. "Doctor, it's urgent. There's something on the internet about you," Marta said, handing her the phone with a worried expression. Elena left the operating room, took off her gloves, and answered a call from Julian. "Elena, where are you?" "At the hospital. Why is everyone—" "Don't leave. I'm on my way there." "Julian, what's going on?" "Sophia." "What about her?" "My God, Elena. I didn't imagine she was capable of this." Elena felt her stomach clench. Capable of what? "She gave an interview to a gossip site. She said you seduced a married man. You got pregnant on purpose, and now you're trying to extort his family. There are photos of you leaving the hospital with the children, with an article making up that you're an opportunist who goes after rich men." The world spun around Elena. She leaned against the hallway wall trying to process the information. Did she use my name? The children's names? She was smart. She didn't use names, but anyone who knows us knows who she's talking about. She's destroying your reputation to force me to come back. "My God," Elena whispered. "What if the patient's parents see this? What if the hospital board—" "I'm coming there. Don't talk to anyone from the press. Don't until I get there." But it was too late. When Elena went down to the ground floor of the hospital, there were 3 reporters at the reception and a group of onlookers outside. The questions all came at the same time. "Dr. Suarez, is it true that you got pregnant on purpose to blackmail Julian Cole? How do you respond to the accusations that you're using the children to extort money? Do you confirm that you kept your sons hidden to gain financial leverage later?" Elena felt nauseous. She gently pushed the reporters and walked out the side door, but they followed her. It was then that she saw Leo and Tiago getting out of Claudia's car, the nanny, who was coming to pick her up for her routine medical appointment. "Mom!" Tiago shouted, running towards her. "No!" Elena yelled, seeing the cameras turn toward the children. "You can't film them." But the damage was already done. The flashes went off, the microphones were extended, and Elena saw the exact moment that Leo and Tiago realized something was very wrong. The fear in their eyes broke her more than any headline. Claudia, bless Claudia, acted quickly. She took the children by the hand and led them back to the car, while Elena tried to block the cameras with her own body. "Please, leave the children alone," she pleaded. "They have nothing to do with this." It was then that Julian arrived, like a hurricane. Elena had never seen him so furious. He stood between her and the reporters, with such an intimidating presence that they instinctively backed away. "Get out of here, now!" he said in a low voice, but full of authority. "And if I see any image of these children published anywhere, you'll be dealing with my lawyers. Mr. Cole, do you confirm that you ended the engagement because of this situation?" "I confirm that I ended my engagement because I discovered that my ex-fiancé is capable of using innocent children to try to manipulate me," Julian replied, looking directly at the camera. "And if you publish any lies about the mother of my children, I will sue each and every one of you individually." Elena felt her legs buckle. Julian held her by the arm, firm but gentle. "Let's get out of here." In the car on the way to Elena's apartment, they drove in silence. Leo and Tiago were in the back seat, holding hands, quiet in a way that broke her heart. "Mom," Julian said finally in a small voice, "why were those people yelling at you?" Elena turned to them, trying to stay calm. "Sometimes, when people don't like something, they make up stories that aren't true." "And they don't like you?" Leo asked, indignant. They don't know me, Elena explained, but someone told them lies about me. Was it the woman who doesn't like that Dad is our dad? Tiago asked, with a perception that surprised both adults. Julian turned around, impressed. How do you know about her? We listen, Leo said simply. You talk on the phone, and sometimes Mom gets sad afterward. And if a woman doesn't like that Dad is our dad, then she must be bad, Tiago concluded, with the impeccable logic of children. Elena felt her eyes fill with tears. 6 years protecting them from lies and manipulation, and in one day, everything had fallen apart. Listen, Julian said, stopping the car in front of Elena's building. I'm going to fix this. I promise you won't have to go through this again. How? Leo asked. By telling the truth to everyone. That night, after their children were asleep, Elena and Julian sat at the small but cozy kitchen table of her apartment. The television was on with the news, and the story about them was the third item on the program. Scandal involving coal construction heir and public hospital doctor gains relevance on social media, the presenter said, showing blurry photos of Elena and an old photo of Julian. This is going to destroy my career, Elena said, her voice breaking. The parents of my patients will see this and think I'm not trustworthy. The hospital board could suspend me until this is cleared up. It won't come to that, Julian said, taking her hand across the table. Early tomorrow, I'm giving a press conference. I'm going to tell the truth about everything. And your company, your family, they can have it, he said. And Elena saw that he was serious. Elena, let me finish. He squeezed her hand. I won't let them destroy you for my mistakes. If the price of defending you is losing everything I have, then so be it. But I won't stand by while she hurts you and the children. Elena looked at the man in front of her, the same man who 6 years ago had chosen appearances over love. But there was something different in his eyes now, a determination that hadn't existed before. And what if your family disinherits you? What if you lose the company? Then I'll rebuild it, alone if necessary, or with you if you let me. Before Elena could answer, a small voice echoed from the hallway. Mom, I can't sleep. Tiago appeared at the kitchen door, carrying his teddy bear. Julian immediately got up, as if he had no right to be there during the children's bedtime. I'm leaving, he said. It's late anyway. No, Tiago said, surprising both of them. You can stay. Love, your dad has his own house, Elena explained gently. But he can sleep on the sofa, Tiago insisted, looking at Julian. So if those bad people come back, you're here to protect us. Elena felt her heart clench. Julian knelt down to Tiago's level. You want me to stay? Yes, and Leo wants you to too, but he's pretending to be asleep. How do you know? Because when he's really asleep, he snores, and he's not snoring. Elena laughed despite everything, and saw Julian smile for the first time in days. If your mom lets me, I'll stay. Tiago ran to Elena and put on that irresistible face that she could never refuse. Please, Mom, just for today? Elena looked at Julian, who was watching her with a hopeful and vulnerable expression. For 6 years, she had been the only one responsible for all the important decisions in the children's lives. 6 years, making decisions alone, protecting them from everyone and everything. Maybe it was time to start sharing that burden. Okay, she said finally. Just for today. Tiago celebrated in a low voice and gave Julian a kiss on the cheek before running back to his room. Elena saw Julian close his eyes and touch the spot on his face where Tiago had kissed him, as if he wanted to save that moment forever. Elena, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she replied, but she was smiling. You still have to prove that you deserve to stay. I will, he promised. Every day, for the rest of my life, I'll prove it. And that night, for the first time in 6 years, Elena slept knowing she wasn't alone. Not completely alone. And when she woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of Leo having a nightmare, it was Julian who got up first from the sofa and followed her to the children's room. "Dad?" Leo whispered in the dark, still half asleep. "I'm here," Julian replied, and Elena saw tears running silently down his face. "Are you leaving in the morning?" "Only if you want me to leave." "I don't want you to." "Then I'm staying." And for the first time in 6 years, Elena began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could really be a family. What do you think of Julian's decision to stay with Elena and the children? Do you think he's truly changed, or is he just reacting to the situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. A new beginning the next morning arrived with a different silence in Elena's apartment. It wasn't the tense silence of the last few days, but a hopeful stillness, as if the whole house was holding its breath before a major transformation. Elena woke up early, as she always did, but for the first time in 6 years, she found someone in the kitchen making coffee. Julian was standing with his back to her, wearing the same clothes from the day before, stirring something in a frying pan. The smell of pancakes floated in the air, and Elena felt a pang of nostalgia so strong that she had to lean against the doorframe. "Do you remember?" she said softly. Julian turned around, a shy smile on his face. "That you love pancakes on Sunday mornings. I never forgot." "It's not Sunday, but it felt like it should be," he replied, and there was something in his voice that made Elena's heart race, as if it were the first day of something new. Before Elena could answer, Leo and Tiago came running into the kitchen, still in their pajamas, hair messy, and with that morning energy that only children have. "Dad!" Tiago shouted, throwing himself into Julian's arms. "You didn't leave!" "I said I would stay," Julian said, lifting him into the air, and Elena saw that his hands were trembling slightly with emotion. "And I always keep my promises." "Always?" Leo asked, always the most cautious. "From now on, always," Julian promised, looking directly into the boy's eyes. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. Elena answered, and her expression immediately changed. "Dr. Reyes?" "What? But that's—" "Yes, I understand. Thank you for letting me know." She hung up with shaky hands. "What happened?" Julian asked, immediately on alert. "It was the hospital director. Someone filed an anonymous complaint against me with the Mexican Council of Pediatrics, alleging medical negligence and emotional instability. They're going to open a formal investigation." The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Even the children sensed the gravity of the situation. "Mom, are you going to lose your job?" Tiago asked, his eyes filling with tears. "I don't know, love," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But Mom never did anything wrong, so nothing should happen." Julian had his fist clenched, his jaw tense. "That was Sophia! She's not going to stop until she completely destroys you." "What do I do now?" Elena felt her strength leaving her. "My career, my reputation, everything I built." "Mom." Leo came over and took her hand. "You saved Pedrito's heart when he came to the hospital. Remember? And you made Mrs. Anna's baby stop crying just by singing to him," Tiago completed. "You're the best doctor in the world." Elena knelt down and hugged the two children, feeling tears run down her face. How could they be so wise and strong at 6 years old? "That's it," Julian said suddenly, with a determination that Elena had never seen. "This ends today." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done 6 years ago. I'm going to tell the truth, all of it, publicly." 3 hours later, Elena was watching the most important press conference of Julian's life on television. He was sitting behind a simple table, with no advisors, no lawyers, Just him and the naked, raw truth. "My name is Julian Cole," he began, looking directly at the cameras. "And I've come here today to tell a story about cowardice, love, and redemption." Elena held her breath. 6 years ago, I met an extraordinary woman, Elena Suarez. She was a pediatric resident, came from a simple family, and had the purest heart I have ever known. We fell madly in love, but I was engaged to someone else, an engagement arranged out of family and business interests. The cameras focused on Julian's face, capturing every nuance of emotion. When my then-fiancée discovered our relationship, she gave me an ultimatum, and I, out of pure cowardice, chose appearances over love. I broke up with Elena in the cruelest possible way, saying things that weren't true, hurting the only person who truly loved me. Elena saw tears running down his face on the screen. What I didn't know was that Elena was pregnant with twins, my sons, and because of my cowardice, she raised Leo and Tiago alone for 6 years, alone, but with so much love that they became the most extraordinary children I have ever met. The press room was in complete silence. 2 weeks ago, fate gave us a second chance. I discovered my sons and tried to win back Elena's trust. But my ex-fiancé, who until yesterday was my fiancé again, did not accept it. She began a smear campaign against Elena, making up lies, destroying the reputation of a brilliant doctor who dedicates her life to saving children. Julian stopped, took a deep breath, and continued. So I'm here to make a few things clear. First, Elena Suarez never, at any time, tried to blackmail or extort me. She raised our children alone, paying for every bill, every medication, every school uniform with her own salary. Second, she never prevented me from knowing the children. It was I who was not present, out of pure ignorance and cowardice. Third, Elena is the most competent and dedicated doctor I know, and any complaint against her is clearly motivated by personal revenge. He stood up, picked up a folder, and took out some documents. Here are the receipts for Elena's expenses for the children over the last 6 years. Every medical consultation, every school supply, every piece of clothing, all paid for by her. If there is anyone who owes anything in this story, it is I, who owes 6 years of child support, 6 years of presence, 6 years of fatherly love. The conference continued for over an hour, with Julian answering all the journalists' questions with a brutal and disconcerting honesty. He admitted mistakes, took responsibility, and defended Elena with a passion that made her heart race. When it ended, Elena's phone rang immediately. "Hey, don't you yell!" "Yes, you do," the three of them replied in unison, and she realized that for the first time she was being outvoted by her own family. Family. The word resonated in her mind with a naturalness that surprised her. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, Julian was helping Leo with a volcano model for school when Tiago approached him. "Dad?" "Yes, champ." "Are you going to marry Mom?" Julian almost knocked over the volcano. Elena, who was washing dishes in the kitchen, stopped with her hands in the soapy water. "Why do you want to know that?" Julian asked carefully. "Because you've been sleeping on the sofa for 3 weeks, and the sofa is no place for a dad to sleep," Tiago explained with the simple logic of children. "Dad has to sleep in Mom's room. And also because Amanda in my class said that when parents love each other, they get married," Leo completed. "Do you guys love each other?" Elena appeared at the door of the living room, drying her hands on a dish towel. Julian looked at her, and she saw in his eyes the same question the children had asked. "That's adult talk," Elena said. "Finally. But we're part of the family," Tiago protested. "We have the right to an opinion." "And what is your opinion?" Julian asked, genuinely curious. "You have to propose to Mom," Leo said, "in the right way, on one knee and with a ring." "And can we be the best men?" Tiago added hopefully. Elena felt her heart racing dangerously. "Children, that's not how—" "Elena," Julian interrupted her, getting up slowly. "Can I talk to you alone?" They went out to the balcony. The sun was setting over Mexico City, painting the sky in orange and pink. Julian was silent for a long moment, watching the city that stretched out before them. "They're right," he said finally. "About what?" "About me sleeping on the sofa. About it being no place for a dad." He turned to her. "Elena, I know it's still early. I know you have every right not to trust me, but I don't want to live half a life anymore. Julian, let me finish." He took her hands. "I spent 6 years of my life doing what other people expected of me, marrying who was convenient, working where it was appropriate, being who was accepted, and in the end, I was empty, completely empty." Tears began to roll down Elena's face. "But now, with you and the children, I feel whole for the first time in my life. I wake up every day wanting to be a better person, wanting to deserve their love, wanting to build something real and true." "You already deserve it," Elena whispered. "You have for 3 weeks now. You prove it every day. Then answer me one thing. Can you forgive me? Can you trust me again?" Elena looked at the man in front of her. The same man who had broken her heart 6 years earlier, but who was now there, vulnerable, honest, fighting every day to win back not only her love, but the trust of 2 children he had not known. "I already forgave you." Her voice was broken with emotion. "I don't know exactly when it happened, but I already forgave you. And trust? I'm learning again. Every day I'm learning again." Julian smiled, and it was as if the sun had risen in the middle of the sunset. "Then, do you accept?" "Accept what? You haven't asked anything yet." Elena laughed through her tears. It was then that Julian did exactly what Leo had suggested. He knelt down, took a small velvet box from his pocket, and opened it, revealing a simple and delicate ring. "Elena Suarez," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you accept to give me the opportunity to be the husband you deserve and the father our children deserve? Will you accept to build a real family with me?" "Accept, Mom!" 2 voices shouted from the living room. "We're listening, and you have to accept!" Elena and Julian laughed, tears rolling freely down both their faces. "They have a convincing argument," Elena said. "And you, what do you say?" Elena looked at the ring, at the man kneeling in front of her, at the living room door where she knew 2 little boys were holding their breath, waiting for her answer. "I say yes," she whispered. "Yes to everything. To marriage, to family, to starting over. Yes." Julian slid the ring onto her finger and stood up to kiss her, but they were interrupted by Leo and Tiago, who launched themselves into the middle of the hug, shouting, "We did it! He did it! We're going to be a real family!" 6 months later, on a sunny September morning, Elena woke up on her wedding day, with Leo and Tiago jumping on the bed. "Mom, wake up! Today you're going to become Dad's wife, and we're going to be the handsomest, best men in the world," Tiago added, already wearing his tiny tuxedo. The ceremony took place in the garden of Our Lady of Guadalupe Children's Hospital, surrounded by colleagues from work, patients Elena had treated over the years, and the 2 families, the traditional Cole family, who had learned to respect Elena after seeing their son reborn by her side, and Elena's small but warm family, made up of friends who had become brothers. When Elena walked down the makeshift aisle between the chairs, arm in arm with Leo and Tiago, who insisted on giving her away to their father, Julian felt his heart was going to explode with happiness. "Take good care of our mom," Leo whispered to Julian when they reached the altar. "Forever," Julian promised. During the ceremony, when the officiant asked if there was anyone against the union, Tiago raised his hand. "I'm in favor," he shouted, drawing laughter from everyone present. And when they were finally declared husband and wife, Leo and Tiago shouted in unison, "Now we're a complete family." A year later, Elena and Julian inaugurated the Leo and Tiago Children's Institute, a clinic specialized in free care for children with chronic diseases. The name had been the idea of the children themselves, who wanted other children to have the same opportunity to be cared for with love that they had always had. On the plaque at the entrance, a simple phrase summarized everything they had learned. True love is not the one that never fails. It's the one that chooses to stay, even after the failures. And on a random Sunday afternoon, Elena watched Julian teaching Leo and Tiago how to play soccer in the garden of the new house they bought together. Laughter echoed in the air, mixed with the sound of the wind in the trees and the distant noise of the city. "Mom!" Tiago shouted from the garden. "Are you coming to play with us?" "I'm coming," she shouted back, dropping the book she was reading and running to join her family, the family she almost lost, that she fought to win back, and that she now knows is indestructible. Forever. Elena finally understood that some love stories need to be broken before they can be rebuilt, and when they are rebuilt, with the experience of pain and the wisdom of forgiveness, they become unbreakable. Forever. What did you think of this emotional ending? What did you learn from this story about forgiveness and love? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more impactful stories. The weight of a broken heart, the morning light streamed through the large windows of the enormous mansion in Boston. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the faint perfume of the gardenias that Eleanor used to place in glass vases on the table. She, with her long hair and warm smile, finished preparing breakfast. She liked to pamper Arthur, her husband. Despite his coldness, there were fleeting moments when she felt him to be human, even tender. Arthur Bennett was a powerful man, a millionaire by inheritance, but known for having built his own reputation. Always impeccable, always distant. He loved control and hated feeling like something was slipping through his hands. In the eyes of the world, Eleanor was a lucky woman. She lived surrounded by luxury, with a driver, a personal masseuse, and access to the most exclusive circles in the city. But the silence between them each morning weighed more than any fortune. They had been married for 7 years. 7 years of treatments, frustrated hopes, and fertility tests. At first, Arthur was understanding, even optimistic. But over time, his patience turned into impatience, and then into contempt. "Maybe this simply wasn't meant for us," he would say, without even looking her in the eyes. One night, during an elegant dinner with investors at their home, one of the wives, unknowingly, asked Eleanor if they were thinking of having children yet. Arthur clenched his jaw, avoided answering, and changed the subject abruptly. Later, in private, he exploded. "Do you know what they think of me? That I married a woman who can't give me an heir? Is that what you want them to think? That I'm an incomplete man?" Eleanor broke inside. Her diagnosis of infertility, seemingly wrong in retrospect, haunted her like a shadow. But more than the physical pain, it hurt to see Arthur become a stranger. The man who one day wrote her a handwritten letter for her birthday now signed checks to pay for her silence. Despite everything, she still loved him. Every morning she prepared his breakfast. Every night she waited for him, with a cup of tea. And on every anniversary, she left a note hidden under his pillow, even though he never said anything. One rainy afternoon, while Arthur was talking in a low voice on the phone in his study, Eleanor heard a name she didn't recognize. Sophia. It wasn't just the name, it was the laugh. A laugh he hadn't shared with her in years. Something in her stomach tightened. She didn't want to think the worst, but a pang of intuition pricked her like a thorn. That night, while he slept, she opened one of the drawers of his desk. There she found a folder with legal documents, and among them, a request for the separation of assets. Signed, sealed, and dated, Eleanor's world collapsed in silence. No screams, no tears, only an almost inaudible whisper escaped her lips. "When did you stop loving me?" The next day, Arthur left on a business trip to Seattle. Eleanor, alone in the immensity of that house that no longer felt like hers, began to pack her things. Not by choice, but out of an instinct for survival. The beginning of her redemption. Welcome to Narratives and Memories. First, I ask you to leave a like so that YouTube understands that our content is valuable and shows it to more people. The doctor's office smelled of disinfectant and despair. Eleanor squeezed Arthur's hand tightly as the doctor reviewed the latest results. She, with her heart pounding in her ears, was hoping for a miracle, but it didn't come. The doctor's voice was soft, almost pitying. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vance. There's no progress. The probability of a natural pregnancy remains minimal." Arthur didn't even blink. He stood up, gave a dry thank you, and left without looking back. Eleanor took several seconds to react before running after him. In the parking lot, under a relentless sun, he spoke the words that would mark her forever. "I can't keep pretending. This isn't a life. I can't stay with an incomplete woman." The blow wasn't just emotional. It was a surgical wound to her soul. She wanted to respond, but tears came first. "Arthur, as if he had been rehearsing this speech for months, continued. I need an heir. My mother, my family. Everyone expects me to continue the legacy. And you tie me to a failure. Days later, she received a notification from a law firm. She had to leave the mansion in 15 days. Not only that, Arthur had canceled her cards, suspended the domestic staff, and blocked her access to the joint account. Everything disappeared, except for the memories that relentlessly hammered at her mind. Eleanor tried to talk to him. She called. She sent messages. She wrote letters or doigts that were never delivered, but Arthur shielded himself with his pride. In the press, rumors arose that the marriage had ended due to irreconcilable differences. But within the walls of silence, the truth was crueler. He discarded her as one gets rid of an investment that did not bear fruit. One afternoon, while trying to withdraw money from an ATM, she discovered that not even the card with her name on it worked. The manager explained with discomfort, "Ma'am, your account was closed by instructions of the primary holder." She staggered out, feeling the ground disappear under her feet. In the solitude of the modest boarding house where she was staying temporarily, she wrote in her diary, "He took everything from me, except what he doesn't see. The love that still remains in me, and the strength he underestimated." Arthur, for his part, began to appear at social events with a new companion, Sophia Marine, the daughter of an influential politician. The press called them the new golden couple of Boston. Meanwhile, Eleanor spent her nights doing laundry for the neighbors, trying to scrape together enough to pay the next week's rent. It was on one of those days, exhausted and with a fever, that she fainted in the street. And there, fate began to change, although she didn't know it yet. A new hope. The rain fell on the rooftops of a small town in Massachusetts with a melancholic rhythm, as if the sky shared Eleanor's grief. She arrived at the bus terminal with an old suitcase, a blanket, and an envelope with the few dollars she had left. No one knew she was the ex-wife of one of the richest men in the country, and she preferred it that way. Hannah, her great-aunt, received her with eyes full of tears and a hug that said more than 1,000 words. The house was small, with peeling paint and a smell of medicinal herbs. But there, for the first time in weeks, Eleanor slept without fear. In the makeshift room she shared with dried plants hanging from the ceiling, she began to understand what it was to rebuild herself from scratch. There were no golden mirrors or Egyptian cotton sheets, but there was hot tea, silence, and, little by little, peace. Without a degree in hand or formal experience, she got a modest job at a local flower shop. She spent hours arranging roses, lilies, and sunflowers. Every flower she cut, every ribbon she tied on the bouquets, was a thread of hope between her fingers. The beauty of the flowers, ephemeral and brave, resonated with her own life. One morning, while watering orchids, a woman came in looking for flowers for her mother's funeral. Eleanor, with a soft voice, put together an arrangement with such care that the client cried when she received it. "You have a gift, girl. Your flowers comfort the soul." Those words were etched in her heart. Despite the pain, something inside her began to sprout. It wasn't rage, nor was it resignation. It was a new kind of strength, silent and serene. Sometimes, while watching the sunset over the colorful rooftops of the town, she wondered if Arthur ever thought about her. But she no longer cried for him. One day, while helping Hannah lift some heavy boxes, she felt a sudden dizziness. She thought it was just exhaustion, or maybe stress. But that night, feeling a slight tingling in her belly, something awoke. A deep intuition, a whisper from her body that she couldn't ignore. She secretly bought a pregnancy test at the pharmacy. Her heart was racing as she waited for the result. When the two clear red lines appeared, her legs gave way. A warm cry broke from her chest. "Oh my God, I'm pregnant." In the silence of the dark room, Eleanor hugged her pillow and whispered, "No one is going to take this child from me. This one will be mine, and will be loved from the first heartbeat." The revelation. The buzzing of crickets mixed with the dry heat of the afternoon in the Massachusetts town. Eleanor had been having morning sickness for days, an inexplicable fatigue, and sudden dizziness. At first, she thought it was stress, or maybe a persistent flu, but something inside her whispered that it was different, that someone, was growing inside her body. After weeks, she decided to go to Dr. Beltran's small office, a rural doctor known for the delicacy with which she treated her patients. The doctor, with attentive eyes and firm hands, examined her carefully. "We're going to do a blood test, just to rule it out," she said in a calm voice. But Eleanor already knew. Her body was screaming what her mind was still resisting to accept. 2 days later, she returned for the results. The paper trembled in her hands before she even read it. Dr. Beltran came in smiling. "Congratulations, Eleanor. You're pregnant." She was speechless. A dense silence filled the room. Her eyes became moist, her heart raced, and a latent question floated in the air. How can this be? For years, she was told her body was sterile, useless for giving life, and now that she was alone, without support, without a home, she was pregnant. A miracle or a punishment? A gift from God or a cruel joke of fate? The doctor held her hand firmly. "Sometimes the body responds when we stop demanding from it. Maybe your soul needed to heal before allowing life to flourish within you." Eleanor left the clinic stunned. She walked through the cobblestone streets as if floating. People passed by, cars honked, but she only heard her own heart. She returned home and, trembling, told her Aunt Hannah the news. The old woman cried with joy, hugging her niece as if she were her own daughter. But that night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The weight of the decision began to fall on her shoulders. How could she raise a child alone? What if Arthur finds out? What if he tries to take him away from her? The memories of what he was capable of doing haunted her. She knew that if that child came into the world, she would never allow him to suffer at the hands of his father. However, despite the fear, something new grew inside her. Not just the baby, but an inner fire. For the first time in a long time, she felt full, complete, capable. It didn't matter that Arthur had called her incomplete. Her body was now a home, her soul was a shield, and her heart was a sacred territory. She knelt before the image of the Virgin Mary in the corner of the room and whispered, "Thank you, but protect him. Make me strong. For him, for me, the Father and the Son." The ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel was packed. Golden lights, expensive wine, and manufactured smiles dominated the scene. Arthur, in an impeccable dark suit, toasted with Sophia Marin, his new fiancée. The daughter of a senator, beautiful and strategic, Sophia represented everything the world expected of him. Political stability, social inheritance, a perfect image. But while she gave an elegant speech about her new philanthropic project, Arthur didn't listen to a single word. His gaze was lost in a memory. Eleanor's light laughter on a Sunday morning when he surprised her with pastries and coffee in bed. Why was that simple thing 1,000 times more real than all of this? That night, after the event, Arthur entered his new apartment alone, all silent marble like a mausoleum. He turned on the television, but the sound was just noise. He poured a glass of whiskey and stood watching an old photo tucked away among his books. Eleanor, smiling in the garden, holding a pot of lavender. He felt a pang in his chest. It wasn't remorse, it was something worse, yearning, a kind of emptiness that echoed even when surrounded by luxury. He tried to convince himself that he had done the right thing. She couldn't give me a child. There was no future with her. But with each attempt to justify himself, the pain grew. Sophia was beautiful, yes, educated, elegant, desired, but there was a coldness in her kisses, an absence of soul in her hugs that Arthur now noticed. It wasn't her fault. It was just that he searched in her eyes for a light that only existed in Eleanor's. He started having strange dreams. He dreamed that Eleanor was calling him from afar in a field of flowers, and that he would run. But he could never reach her. He would wake up sweating, his heart racing, and her name stuck in his throat. One day, during a meeting with his lawyers, he overheard an employee comment that he had seen his ex working in a flower shop in the Massachusetts town. His whole body tensed. Eleanor in Fairhill? He pretended not to care. But that night, he canceled dinner with Sophia, drove to his old house, and stayed parked in front of it, watching from a distance like a stranger. The house looked empty, dead without her. He called his mother Margaret, a haughty and demanding woman, and asked her, "Do you think I made a mistake?" The answer was as sharp as a knife. "You were wrong to take so long. That woman was never on our level." But Arthur no longer believed that. He no longer knew what to believe. He only knew that somewhere, his absence hurt more than his presence had, and that no matter how hard he tried to move on, there was an open wound that neither time nor money could close. It was a warm morning in Chicago when Arthur got out of his armored black car, accompanied by advisors and photographers. The visit to the Roots of Hope NGO was part of a campaign to soften his image in the business world. The idea was simple: photos handing out food, an inspiring speech, and then lunch with influential businessmen. A facade routine. The place was simple, but full of life. Children ran among wilting flowers and broken toys. Women prepared food in large pots. Arthur, with his rehearsed smile, walked among the volunteers. But something made his body freeze. There, at the back of the courtyard, with a floral apron, her hair in a braid, and a different glow on her face, was Eleanor. She was holding a box of vegetables and giving instructions to a little girl. What paralyzed Arthur, however, wasn't just seeing her there. It was noticing what she was carrying in her belly. A prominent, lively, round belly. Eleanor was pregnant. The world around him fell silent. The sound of voices, the click of cameras, everything disappeared. He took a step forward without thinking, but before he could say a word, she saw him. For a second, time stopped. Eleanor's eyes widened in surprise, and her expression went from astonishment to fury in a matter of seconds. She turned her face, handed the box to another volunteer, and walked toward the makeshift kitchen without directing a single word to him. Arthur felt a blow to his chest. How is this possible? Whose child is that? And why didn't she tell me? His head spun with 1,000 questions, all unanswered. He spent the rest of the visit on autopilot. He gave his speech, posed for photos, but in his mind, there was only one image. Eleanor, radiant, full, with his child. Because deep down, something inside him told him that baby was his. And with that idea came a second, even more devastating blow. He had left her just when she had finally given life to what he so desired. In the car on the way back, his advisors spoke enthusiastically about the success of the visit. Arthur, in silence, stared at his reflection in the window. He remembered the last time he saw her, crying with the divorce papers in her hands. He thought she was broken, but now it was he who seemed to be in ruins. When he got home, he went straight to the bar. He poured a double shot of whiskey and called the private detective he had secretly hired years ago. I need you to investigate Eleanor Reyes. Where does she live? Who is she with? And since when has she been pregnant?" His voice trembled, not with rage, but with something Arthur no longer knew how to name. Guilt. A father is born. The sound of whiskey hitting the glass was the only noise in the dark apartment. Arthur spent the night staring at the ceiling, Eleanor's face etched in his mind like a burning tattoo. Pregnant? After all the doctors said? It can't be mine. It can't. That's what he repeated like a mantra, but the doubt had already settled in and was growing like a slow poison. In the following days, Arthur became a ghost. He canceled meetings, avoided Sophia, and ordered his private detective to report on Eleanor's every move. He received photos daily, her serving clients at the flower shop, helping out at NGO workshops, buying fruit at the market with a hand on her belly, and always smiling. That last part tortured him. Why did she look so happy? How could she be so complete without him? The question hurt more than he wanted to admit. For years he believed she depended on him, that without his protection she would wither. But there she was, flourishing without him, and perhaps with his child in her belly. Arthur began to drive alone to the Massachusetts town on weekends, without telling anyone. He would stay in his car, watching from afar with dark glasses and the engine off. One afternoon, he saw her helping a child draw flowers on a community mural. The boy rested his head on her belly and said, "Have you talked to your baby yet? I talk to my little brother like that." She laughed and replied, "Of course I tell him everything." That was too much, and when Arthur gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes burning, he realized that he had dreamed of that moment, and yet he had thrown it all away with harsh words and proud decisions. But he still clung to excuses. He told himself that maybe she was with someone else, that maybe she had moved on quickly. "I don't have proof that this child is mine. I can't assume something like that without certainty." But deep down, he already knew. He knew her eyes. He knew his own timeline, and the baby would be born exactly 9 months after the divorce. One night, drunk and consumed by anguish, Arthur called Eleanor. She didn't answer. He sent a message. "We need to talk." She replied hours later, dryly, "There's nothing to say. What you broke can't be fixed with words." He threw his phone against the wall. The sound of the glass shattering echoed in the empty room. Loneliness, for the first time, was deafening. No glass of wine, no Persian rug, no imported car, eased the hole in his chest. Regret began to burn inside, but his pride still fought to put out the fire. And as happens with men who love too late, Arthur was discovering that denial was just the beginning of the fall. The fine rain fell on the city, as if the sky, too, was in mourning. Arthur was driving slowly, almost aimlessly. But his heart was leading him to a specific destination, the old house where he lived with Eleanor. He parked in front of the iron gate, now covered in rust. The house was empty, for sale. A garden without flowers, dusty windows, and a silence that screamed. He got out of the car and touched the gate, as if hoping she would still open the door smiling. But all he found were memories. In the garden, he remembered Eleanor with her hands full of dirt planting daisies. On the terrace, the two of them drank coffee while talking about the future, a future he himself destroyed, driven by something he couldn't even explain. He drove to his grandmother Margaret's house, the only person in his family who always spoke to him with honesty. She received him with surprise, but also with tenderness. She looked him in the eye and said bluntly, "You look like your grandfather when he lost the love of his life, hard on the outside, empty on the inside." Arthur sat in the old armchair, his head bowed. He told her everything. Eleanor's pregnancy, the encounter at the NGO, the confrontation at the flower shop. He expected to be judged, but he received silence. Until Margaret got up, went to an old drawer, and came back with a yellowish envelope. This arrived months ago. The girl left it with a neighbor. I suppose it was for you, but you were too busy running away to ever find out. Arthur took the letter with trembling hands. It was Eleanor's handwriting. He opened it carefully. The paper smelled of lavender and nostalgia. Arthur, I know you're leaving. I know I'm no longer the woman you want, but I want you to know something before you disappear completely from my life. I never stopped dreaming of you, not even when the pain was tearing me in two. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for not being able to give you a child, but if one day the miracle comes, I want you to know that you were the first man I imagined as a father. With all that's left of me, Eleanor. The words crushed him. A love letter, written shortly before the end. A declaration of hope and pain never read. Arthur cried, not as a businessman, not as a public figure, but as a broken human being. What have I done, Grandma? How was I so blind? Margaret came closer, stroked his face, and said only, sometimes the hardest heart is the one that is most afraid to love. But if it still beats for her, don't give up. The dawn fell silently over the town when a sharp pain woke Eleanor from a restless sleep. It was too early. There were still weeks until the birth, but something wasn't right. She felt the contraction like a wave tearing her apart from the inside. Her breathing became ragged, and a cold sweat ran down her forehead. No, not yet, she whispered, trying to get out of bed. She cried out for Aunt Hannah, who ran to the room with eyes full of fright. Seeing her niece's pained expression and the stained sheet, she grabbed the phone and called a taxi. The nearest hospital was 20 minutes away. Every second was an eternity. Meanwhile, Arthur, still with Eleanor's letter folded in his pocket, was in his apartment staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The phone rang. It was the detective. Sir, Mrs. Reyes was admitted to the hospital. It looks like she went into premature labor. The glass of water fell from his hand. The sound of shattering glass was drowned out by the gunshot of his heart. Without a second thought, he grabbed his car keys and drove through the empty pre-dawn to the town. The city lights flickered as if destiny was sending him signals. When he arrived at the hospital, sweating, disheveled, he desperately asked for Eleanor Reyes. The receptionist hesitated, but seeing his anguish, she pointed him to the maternity ward. In room 208, he saw her, lying down, pale, with her eyes closed. The doctors moved around her. Aunt Hannah saw him, and for a moment wanted to throw him out, but her eyes shone with something between rage and compassion. You're late, but you're here. Eleanor saw him for the first time when they were pushing her to the operating room. Her eyes opened in confusion. He held her hand for an instant. I'm here. She said nothing, just closed her eyes, overcome by the pain. The birth was complicated. There were screams, medical orders, beeping machines. Arthur, outside the operating room, paced back and forth like a lost child. And then the sound that cut through it all, the cry of a baby. A nurse came out with a tired smile. It's a boy. He's fine, and so is she. Arthur fell to his knees in the hallway. Tears ran freely. For the first time, he felt the weight and blessing of being a father. He felt the... Hours later, he entered the room. Eleanor was sleeping. In the bassinet next to her, a small, pink baby, with his eyes closed and his fists clenched. Arthur approached with trembling hands. He touched the baby's head with delicacy. Hello, Leo. It's me. And there, in that instant, without contracts, without fortunes, without pride, a man broke, and a father was born. The road to forgiveness, The morning light filtered through the hospital room windows, painting the atmosphere with soft tones of gold. The silence was only interrupted by the peaceful breathing of Leo in the bassinet next to the bed. Arthur was sitting in an armchair with swollen eyes and a shattered soul. He hadn't slept in hours. He couldn't. Every glance at the baby was a miracle and a stab. Aunt Hannah, with a stern look, entered the room and handed him a small blanket. "Hold him. Babies recognize the heart of the one who loves them." Arthur hesitated, but finally got up and walked to the bassinet. His trembling hands touched Leo's soft skin. And then, as if the world stopped, he took him into his arms. Leo let out a small sound, almost a sigh, and snuggled up against his father's chest. Arthur cried, in silence. The tears fell without hurry, as if washing away years of hardness. He felt for the first time that something inside him was opening, a space that had never been touched before. Eleanor woke up slowly. Seeing the scene, her body tensed. The image of Arthur holding her son was, at the same time, moving and terrifying. She spoke in a low but firm voice. "Who gave you permission to touch him?" Arthur looked at her with red eyes, and his soul laid bare. "I didn't touch him as Arthur Bennett. I hugged him as a broken man, as a father who didn't know how to be on time." Eleanor looked away. The emotion on her face was evident, but she didn't give in. It's not enough to show up when everything is already done. It's not enough to cry. I carried this pregnancy alone. I cried every night alone, and I protected him from you, because you were the one who abandoned us. He came closer, still with Leo in his arms. He wanted to kneel, to plead, to shout, but he did none of that. He just murmured, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Mamas." "I know, but I want to be here, even if it's from afar. I want him to know me." Eleanor extended her arms and took Leo back. She looked at him as one who holds a piece of their own heart and said, "Without hatred but with pain, you're going to have to prove it. Not with words, Arthur. With actions, and that takes time." He understood. He returned the small blanket he was still holding. He gently stroked the baby's foot and left the room in silence, with his chest full of love and guilt. A second chance. The weeks that followed the birth of Leo were a mixture of tenderness and fatigue for Eleanor. The sleepless nights, the unexpected cries, the constant fear of making a mistake. It was all new. But there was also light. Every smile from her baby, every curious look, was a reminder that it was worth continuing, even with a heart in pieces. Arthur, for his part, kept his distance. He kept his promise. He didn't invade, didn't insist, but began to act in silence. He hired an excellent pediatrician to attend to Leo without them knowing he was behind it. He discreetly paid the hospital bills. And every week, a new anonymous delivery would arrive at Aunt Hannah's house. Diapers, ointments, carefully chosen clothes. At first, Eleanor was suspicious. She thought they were donations from the NGO, but there were too many details. The exact size of the clothes, the brand of soap she preferred, even a sunflower-shaped rattle, her favorite flower. Something inside her told her it was Arthur, and that disarmed her. One morning, when she opened one of the boxes, she found a small, unsigned note. It just said, "I know I was late, but I still want to learn to be the man you deserve." Eleanor read it in silence. Tears came without her being able to stop them. Aunt Hannah, always attentive, sat next to her niece and said, "I'm not telling you to forgive him, but there are men who change when love hurts them more than pride." Eleanor was still scared of making a mistake, of opening the door again to a man who had left her in ruins. But she also felt something else. Arthur's presence, though absent, made itself felt in every gesture. And that was beginning to confuse the heart she thought she had shielded forever. Leo, with his big, lively eyes, seemed to notice the change. Every time he saw a new box, he would wave his little arms as if he knew there was affection inside, however discreet. And Eleanor was beginning to understand something that hurt to accept. Arthur was trying in his own way, as he knew how, as he could. One rainy afternoon, Leo had a fever. Eleanor panicked. She didn't know what to do. She called the pediatrician's number that the NGO had gotten for her. In less than 15 minutes, the doctor was at the door with everything needed. Seeing something in his attitude, in his care, made her ask, "Who sent you?" The doctor smiled, hesitated for a moment, but was honest. "Let's just say it's someone who still believes he can repair what he broke." Eleanor was silent. She looked at Leo asleep and whispered, "Maybe, just maybe." It was a sultry night when Leo began to cry in a different way. His little body was burning with fever, and his eyes were glassy. Eleanor, desperate, tried to lower it with compresses, but nothing worked. Aunt Hannah called an emergency taxi, and in minutes, they were at the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, Eleanor tried to stay calm, but her hands were trembling. Leo was crying weakly, as if he no longer had the strength. The doctor was examining him, but time dragged on like a punishment. It was then that, suddenly, the door to the waiting room opened, and Arthur appeared. She didn't ask how he knew. She just looked at him with eyes full of tears and said nothing. Arthur walked toward her, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't try to justify himself. He just sat beside her in silence, like someone who understands that words are no longer enough. Hours later, the doctor informed them that it was only a mild viral infection, but that Leo would remain under observation for 24 hours. Eleanor breathed a sigh of relief, and when she turned, she saw Arthur leaning against the wall, his gaze fixed on the sleeping baby through the window of the ICU. "Thank you for coming," she murmured, without looking at him directly. He was moved. "I couldn't stay home knowing he was sick." Not again. The nurse informed them that only one of the parents could spend the night in the observation room with the baby. Eleanor hesitated. She was exhausted, emotionally drained. She looked at Arthur and, in a silent gesture, handed him the little backpack with Leo's clothes. "Take care of him," she said simply. Arthur entered the room with a heavy heart. Leo was sleeping, connected to monitors and tubes. He sat next to the small hospital bed and took his son's tiny hand. He didn't sleep all night. He sang lullabies in a low voice, made promises, cried, and asked for forgiveness. Not out loud, but with his gaze, with his touch, with his presence. Outside, Eleanor watched through the small window in the door. She saw Arthur leaning over the crib, his face tired, but full of love. For the first time, she didn't see the proud man who had broken her, but a father, a man trying to love well. And that moved her inside. The next morning, when Arthur came out of the room with Leo in his arms, she extended her arms. He handed her the baby with a soft kiss on her forehead, and before he left, he murmured, "Thank you for trusting me, even if only for one night." Eleanor didn't respond, but inside, something was beginning to change. Not all the words in the world would have done what that one silent night accomplished, showing her that perhaps he could still be part of their story. The last dance, the hospital was already quiet when Aunt Hannah took Leo home, insisting that Eleanor get some rest. But that night, sleep didn't come. Sitting on the bench in the hospital's outdoor garden, Eleanor hugged her knees, looking at the cloudy sky. The weight of the last few days left her vulnerable and confused. Arthur approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. He sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. For several minutes, neither of them said anything. Only the sound of crickets and the rustling of trees filled the air. "I don't know where to start," he murmured, looking at the ground. Eleanor took a deep breath, not responding. He continued, "I believed that by leaving, I was doing you a favor. I thought that by leaving, I was freeing you from the failure we felt. But the truth is, I left because I was afraid. Afraid of being like my father. Of staying. Of failing you. Of repeating his abandonment." She looked at him, surprised. She had never seen him so naked, so fragile. "And so you decided to abandon me first," she replied with contained pain, as if that would hurt less. Arthur nodded, his eyes full of tears. "Yes, and you don't know how much I regret it. Since you left, there hasn't been a single day I haven't hurt from your absence. I became everything I swore I would never be, a lonely, empty man with success, but without a soul." Eleanor's tears finally fell, not just for him, but for her, for everything she went through alone, for the nights of fear, for the words that were never said. "You broke something inside me, Arthur, something that took a lot to heal." He moved a little closer, his eyes fixed on hers. "I'm not here to ask you to love me again. I know you can't demand that. I just want you to know that I love you, in a way I never knew how before. And if you'll let me, I want to try to be someone worthy of you and Leo." The silence between them was now different, dense, filled with memories and possibilities. Eleanor wiped her eyes. Her heart was divided between the pain of the past and the echo of a love that perhaps was still alive. But it was still too soon. The wound was still open, although it was beginning to scar. "Don't promise anything, Arthur. Just show me who you can be now." And in that early morning, without kisses, without endings, just with the truth laid bare, two hearts began to find their way back to each other. Slowly, with fear, but alive. A new family. The smell of lavender and chamomile tea filled Aunt Hannah's small room. The days had become slower for the old woman, who now spent most of her time lying down, watching out the window where the bougainvillea flowers danced with the wind. Her body was beginning to give way, but her mind was still lucid, and her heart was restless. Eleanor entered with Leo in her arms. Her tired expression was mixed with tenderness as she saw her grandmother smile, though she was fragile. She placed the baby next to her, and for a few minutes, no words were said, only glances, sighs, and a silent affection between 3 generations. "Now your son has your father's eyes," murmured Hannah, stroking Leo's little hand. "And the strong soul of the Vance women." Eleanor smiled sadly, sitting next to the bed. Her eyes soon filled with tears. There was no need to explain anything. Her grandmother knew that look, the one of someone who carries an unresolved love. "I saw him cry, Grandma. He spoke to me like never before. He says he's changed, but I don't know if I can trust him again. I'm afraid of opening the door and having him break me again." Hannah squeezed her hand with a strength that was surprising for someone so fragile. "My dear, true love isn't about not being afraid. It's about feeling it and still choosing to love." Eleanor cried in silence, looking at Leo sleeping. Hannah continued, "To forgive is not to forget what happened. It is to choose not to let that pain chain you. Arthur doesn't deserve a second chance just for wanting it, but you deserve to live without carrying a grudge." She looked at her with tear-filled eyes, but also with a brilliant lucidity. "I loved once, and out of pride, I let him go. I lived many years with that thorn. I don't want you to live like that." Eleanor felt the weight and the lightness of those words. It was as if her heart, until then silent, began to whisper. There was no definitive answer, but there was a path, and maybe deep down, she knew that path involved listening to what love still had to tell her. Leaving the room with Leo snuggled against her chest, she looked at the pink sky of the sunset and whispered, Maybe there's still something to save. A perfect choice. The coffee shop in the small town square was almost empty when Eleanor arrived. She had Leo in the stroller, and her eyes were full of quiet. Arthur was already waiting for her, sitting at a discreet table, with a humble and anxious expression. When he saw her, he got up slowly, but she made a signal with her hand. "Just listen today, please." He nodded without saying anything. He sat down. They were face to face, but between them was a broken bridge made of memories, wounds, and unfulfilled promises. Eleanor looked at Leo, who was sleeping peacefully, before she began to speak. "For months I slept with fear of not having enough to feed him, of something happening to him, of him being born and not recognizing me as his mother." Her voice was firm, but full of emotion. "You have no idea what it was like to feel the ground torn from under my feet. You were my home, Arthur, my refuge. And one day, you just left me in the street as if I had never meant anything." He squeezed his hands on the table but remained silent. His eyes shone, but he didn't dare to interrupt. "I cried until I had no more tears. I felt empty, useless, and still I never stopped loving you. I hated myself for that. How can you love someone who broke you?" She paused. She took a deep breath. But then Leo grew inside me, and with every heartbeat of his, something of mine was reborn. I discovered that the love I had for you wasn't a weakness. It was my strength. I survived for him. And yes, also for what we once were. Arthur held back his tears. His eyes were fixed on hers, as if every word was a stab deep in his chest. "When I saw you at the hospital, when you held him, I saw the man I dreamed of as the father of my son. But I also remembered the one who abandoned me without looking back, and that still hurts." She reached out, gently touched his hand, and with a soft voice completed, "I don't know if I can trust you again, but I also don't want to live with this wall between us. For Leo's sake, and for what's left of us, we deserve to try." Arthur finally spoke in a broken whisper. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity, even with fear. I promise not to waste it." And in that instant, between tears and confessions, between pain and hope, something new began to be born. It wasn't a reconciliation yet, but it was forgiveness, and with it, the real chance to start over. It was a Sunday morning, and the sun shone timidly through the window of Aunt Hannah's little house. Eleanor had invited Arthur to spend a few hours with Leo. They weren't living together yet. They hadn't officially gotten back together, but now he was welcome, with limits, with caution, but with space to be a father. Leo, almost 9 months old, was beginning to explore the world with curious eyes and wobbly steps. He was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by toys. Arthur, kneeling next to him, made funny voices with a teddy bear. Eleanor watched from afar, leaning against the kitchen doorway, with a mixture of love and doubt dancing in her chest. "This is the bravest bear in the world," Arthur said, as he pretended to have a battle against a stuffed giraffe. Leo laughed with his mouth wide open, that laugh that only babies can give, pure, contagious, full of life. Eleanor allowed herself to smile. It was beautiful to see them together, but there was still a part of her that was protective, an invisible barrier that time and gestures were slowly trying to dissolve. Then, suddenly, Leo babbled something. At first, it was just a sound, but the second time it was clear, loud, and unexpected. "Papa!" Time stopped. Arthur froze, as if he wasn't sure what he had just heard. Eleanor dropped the kitchen towel she had in her hands. Leo repeated, now pointing his little fingers at the man in front of him. "Papa!" Arthur's eyes filled with tears instantly. A knot formed in his throat, and he fell to his knees, hugging his son with all the care in the world. "Yes, my love, I'm your papa," he murmured through tears, kissing the boy's head. Eleanor put her hand to her mouth. She was crying in silence. There was nothing left to say. In that instant, no promise, no explanation, no apology was worth more than that word, spoken with innocence and truth. Leo had chosen, and with a single word, he disarmed the past, broke down the barriers, and showed that sometimes love just needs a signal to bloom again. The wedding. The sky over the town looked hand-painted. Soft clouds floated lazily, and the air was filled with the aroma of wildflowers. On top of a hill, between ancient trees and a small wooden altar adorned with lavender, Arthur waited. He was more nervous than ever. He was no longer the man of expensive suits and cold speeches. He was just a man in love, waiting for the woman who had changed his life. The ceremony had been planned with simplicity. No luxuries, no photographers, or influential guests. Only the closest people. Aunt Hannah, some neighbors from the NGO, the nurse who had cared for Leo, and the priest who baptized the children of the town. Arthur wanted it that way. A new beginning. Clean and pure. The chairs were full of wildflowers. A single violin played a soft melody. And then a murmur spread. "Here she comes!" Eleanor appeared at the top of the hill with Leo in her arms, dressed in white. The dress was simple, of light fabric, but she looked like she had stepped out of a dream. The wind played with her skirt and her hair, and the baby was smiling, waving his little arms, as if he knew that day was special. Arthur saw her and felt his legs weaken. His eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just from seeing her so beautiful. It was from seeing her there, present, choosing him again, choosing them. When she reached the altar, Eleanor handed Leo into Aunt Hannah's arms and looked into Arthur's eyes. He took her hands, and with a choked voice he said, "I have no perfect promises, but I have a heart that now beats whole, thanks to you and our son. I want to love you as one loves when they understand the value of loss." She smiled emotionally. Tears rolled down her face, but they were not of pain. They were of liberation. "And I," she said, "choose to trust. I choose to heal with you, because I learned that love is not the absence of wounds. It's knowing how to love again, even with the scars." The priest blessed them with simple and true words. When they were finally declared husband and wife, the applause was soft but full of soul. Aunt Hannah cried without holding back. Leo in her arms babbled with laughter, as if he felt that everything was finally in its place. At the end of the afternoon, as they danced barefoot on the grass, Arthur held Eleanor by the waist and Leo in his arms. The sun set slowly behind the mountains, painting the sky with warm tones of orange and gold. And there, without luxury, without an audience, the family that fate almost destroyed and that love patiently rebuilt was born. A story of redemption. The house was small, with adobe walls, wooden windows, and a garden that Eleanor insisted on caring for every day. There were pots of lavender at the entrance, toys scattered on the lawn, and the constant sound of laughter, especially Leo's, who was now just over a year old, running behind a stubborn chicken that had escaped from the coop. Arthur was on the terrace, barefoot, with a cup of coffee in his hands. He watched the scene as one watches the greatest spectacle of their life. His wife, in a light dress and with dirty feet, guiding their son with patience and joy. That was all he never knew he needed. They didn't live in luxury. Money was now secondary. He had left part of his business behind, ceding control of the company to his brother. He wanted time. Time with Leo. Time with Eleanor. Time to be the man he always wanted to be, but only now knew how. Sometimes at night, Eleanor would wake up with nightmares from the past. Sometimes Arthur still blamed himself for everything he had destroyed. But in those moments, a silent hug, the warmth of the other in the narrow bed, was enough to remember that they were there, together, and that was already everything. Aunt Hannah spent weekends with them, telling old stories, teaching Leo to plant beans in little glass jars. The house was never silent. It always smelled of bread in the oven, soft music played on the old radio, and tiny footsteps could be heard running through the living room. Arthur spent hours building wooden toys in the yard. Leo said "Papa" with pride and "Mama" with tenderness. And every time he fell and cried, it was both of them who ran to pick him up. There were no perfect roles. There was love, shared, present. One afternoon, the three of them sat on the swing made of ropes and a board in the garden. Eleanor rested her head on Arthur's shoulder, and Leo slept in her lap. The sun was setting slowly, coloring the sky with warm tones, as if the whole world sighed in peace. "Do you think this will last?" Eleanor murmured. "I don't know for how long," Arthur replied, kissing her forehead. "But I know that every day we're going to choose it. Because love didn't heal everything. The scars are still there, like marks from a war overcome. But love transformed everything. And in that modest house, with laughter in the garden and a creaking swing, there was finally a home. I invite you to leave your opinion about this incredible story in the comments. If you liked it, share it. And subscribe to the channel to support our work. Another story is appearing on your screen that will probably also move you. Don't miss it.